From July 9th to July 11th, 2024, NATO held a summit in Washington, D.C. to commemorate its 75th anniversary. As a legacy of the Cold War, NATO has spent decades transforming itself from a collective security organization with 12 founding members into a massive military alliance consisting of 32 member states, covering most of Europe and North America. However, as the organization approaches its centennial milestone, the question arises: what does the future hold for it amid today's complex and turbulent global landscape? The rise of new powers, strategic competition between nations, and global challenges such as technology, economic shifts, and security concerns are putting its original role and mission to the test. Nevertheless, history may offer valuable insights. Lessons from the past, how the organization has overcome crises, adapted, and redefined its position, could illuminate the path forward, helping it maintain influence and contribute to shaping the world order in the decades to come. First, we must understand why NATO is considered a legacy and a fundamental pillar of the Cold War. To do so, we must go back to the period following World War II. NATO was established in 1949, initially serving the Cold War interests of the West against the Eastern Bloc. At the same time, it was a crucial foundation for the United States to intervene comprehensively and consolidate its leadership position in Europe, both politically and militarily. More specifically, World War II prompted the U.S. to abandon its long-standing isolationist policies and shift toward globalism, striving to build an international political, economic, and security order centered around Washington, D.C. Naturally, Europe held a significant strategic position for both the U.S. and the Soviet Union, seen by both as the primary battleground for their struggle for influence. After the war, the European continent was devastated, facing economic hardship. Moreover, European nations found it difficult to ensure their security independently. The U.S. recognized that under these circumstances, Europe could easily lean toward the Soviet Union, like a row of falling dominoes. As a result, Washington actively implemented policies to support Europe through the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. The primary focus of these efforts was to intervene and lead the transatlantic alliance in politics, economics, and security. This strategy not only aligned with America's geopolitical interests in linking up with Europe to counter the Soviet Union, but also met Europe's urgent need for economic recovery and security assurance. By 1948, certain political upheavals accelerated this process, notably the February coup in Czechoslovakia. The Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, backed by the Soviet Union, seized power through a coup, marking the beginning of 4 decades of communist rule. This event alarmed other European nations, fearing they might face a similar fate. In response, the United Kingdom and France signed the Treaty of Brussels, forming a mutual defense alliance. These developments worried the U.S. across the Atlantic, reinforcing its belief that European nations were increasingly leaning toward the Soviet Union. The fear of a domino effect prompted urgent action. To counter this growing influence, on April 4, 1949, in Washington, the U.S., Canada, and 5 nations from the Treaty of Brussels, namely the UK, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, along with 5 additional countries, Portugal, Italy, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland, signed the Washington Treaty, officially establishing NATO. This new international alliance aimed to foster political, economic, and security cooperation across the Atlantic. In its early years, NATO faced considerable skepticism from both the United States and its European allies. Within the U.S., there were debates about how deeply it should commit to European security, while in Europe, many leaders were concerned about becoming too reliant on American military power. The significant imbalance in capabilities, which favored the United States, raised doubts about whether decision-making within the alliance would be truly equitable and whether responsibilities would be fairly shared. However, the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950 dramatically shifted the alliance's priorities. The conflict highlighted the need for a more unified and robust Western defense strategy. In response, NATO accelerated its military development, leading to the creation of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, SHAPE, in 1951. This marked a major turning point, transforming NATO into the structured military alliance we recognize today, with an integrated command system that continues to shape its operations. During the Cold War, NATO encountered numerous internal crises, such as France's withdrawal from NATO's Integrated Military Command in 1966, and tensions between Greece and Turkey. Despite these challenges, NATO gradually developed its decision-making framework, strengthened its internal political structure, and gained valuable experience through major crises, including the Berlin Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Objectively, NATO's formation and development were closely tied to the Cold War, serving as a direct reflection of US-Soviet and US-European relations during that era. Its expansion and growth continuously influenced the dynamics of the Cold War. On one hand, it fostered political, economic, military, and even cultural integration within the Western Bloc, reaching its peak after World War II. On the other hand, it fueled a competitive arms race, leading to the division of military alliances. A clear example is West Germany's accession to NATO in 1955, which prompted the Soviet Union to establish the Warsaw Pact, creating a retaliatory standoff between the two largest military blocs of the Cold War. Following the Cold War, NATO faced an existential crisis, with many speculating that it would dissolve since it no longer had a common enemy. However, contrary to these predictions, NATO persisted into the 21st century for three main reasons. Given these internal tensions, NATO experienced a period of stagnation. However, recent geopolitical crises have revitalized the alliance. In 2014, the annexation of Crimea prompted NATO leaders to commit to increasing defense spending, pledging that by 2024, at least 2% of GDP would go toward military expenditures. By 2016, NATO bolstered its presence along its eastern flank, deploying multinational battalions in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has further reinforced NATO's significance. Since the EU lacks independent command structures and coordinated military forces, NATO, led by the US, remains the primary security pillar for Europe. Even French President Emmanuel Macron, who once declared NATO brain-dead, admitted that the Ukraine crisis had revitalized the alliance. Looking ahead, NATO faces complex challenges. As Europe continues integrating, its long-term interests may not always align with Washington's strategic objectives. NATO must also navigate the US's shift toward the Indo-Pacific, balancing European security with America's growing focus on Asia. In conclusion, in the short and medium term, NATO will remain an indispensable security pillar for Europe, strengthening transatlantic cooperation. However, in the long term, Europe must enhance its strategic autonomy to ensure sustainable development in both political and economic realms. Do you think NATO will continue to expand its influence? Or will internal divisions and shifting global dynamics eventually weaken the alliance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, take a second to hit the like button, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next exciting videos.